Have you ever walked into a room, sat next to someone you've never met, and felt an immediate, overwhelming urge to run away? Not because they were rude, not because they looked threatening, but because the moment your eyes met, you realized they weren't looking at you, they were looking through you. Right now, there is a hyper-specific archetype of human being moving through the population. They don't look dangerous. In fact, on paper, they are exactly what the world claims it wants. They are highly intuitive, deeply perceptive, and fiercely protective of the truth. In behavioral psychology, we call them Sophia Empaths. But in the real world, they are quietly becoming the most intensely hated, isolated individuals on the planet. And the reason why is terrifying. It has nothing to do with them doing anything wrong. It has everything to do with what happens to your brain chemistry when you stand within 5 feet of them. Human beings spend 90% of their daily lives operating behind a psychological mask. We smile when we are angry. We say, "I'm fine," when we are falling apart. We project confidence to hide our deepest insecurities. It is the social lubricant that keeps society functioning. It keeps us feeling safe. But a Sophia empath is a biological anomaly. To them, your mask isn't a shield, it's a window. They don't just guess what you're hiding. Their nervous system actively reads your microexpressions, your vocal shifts, and your subtle postural changes before you even realize you've made them. They see your hidden anger, your buried shame, and your unvarnished envy in real time. Imagine walking through life knowing that every lie you tell to protect your ego is completely transparent to one specific person. This isn't just uncomfortable, it triggers a primal, hardwired threat response in the human brain. When your subconscious realizes its deepest secrets are being mapped out by a stranger, it doesn't feel loved. It feels hunted. It enters a state of psychological nakedness. And when human beings feel exposed and defenseless, they don't say thank you. They don't appreciate the gift of empathy. They attack. They alienate. They defame. Over the next few minutes, we are going to pull back the curtain on the dark mechanics of human behavior to reveal the exact, hidden psychological triggers that cause people to despise these individuals. We will dissect the subtle, unspoken signals Sophia empaths send out that set off survival alarms in ordinary people, and explore the dangerous moment this hyper-perceptive individual decides to use their insight as a weapon. If you have ever felt an inexplicable wave of hostility from people you were only trying to help, or if you've ever felt a deep instinctual dread around someone who seemed perfectly nice, what you are about to see will change the way you read human interactions forever. Pay very close attention to the behavioral markers we are about to discuss, because the patterns are playing out around you every single day. Every single day, you are engaging in a silent war of signals. From the angle of your head to the microscopic tension in your jaw, you are broadcasting your internal state to the world. Most people are completely blind to this data stream. They listen to the words, accept the polite nods, and move on. But a very small, dangerous percentage of the population sees everything. The Sophia empath is a behavioral outlier. They possess an involuntary, hyper-acute tracking system for human emotion. When they look at you, they aren't just engaging in a social ritual. They are running an ongoing asset assessment of your psychological state. They decode your pupil dilations, your breathing shifts, and the subtle inflections in your voice. They know you are insecure before you finish your sentence. They spot your hidden resentment while you are actively laughing at their joke. And that is precisely why people want to destroy them. Human beings possess a desperate, hardwired need for psychological privacy. We need to believe that our dark thoughts, our petty envies, and our deep-seated flaws are safely locked away behind our ribs. It is a survival mechanism. It allows us to build status, form alliances, and protect our egos. The moment you encounter someone who can read the fine print on your soul, your primitive brain perceives an existential threat. The amygdala screams that you have been compromised. When you are around a Sophia empath, the standard rules of social deception completely fail. You cannot manipulate them. You cannot flatter them to hide an agenda. You cannot use passive aggression to control the room, because they will calmly look you in the eyes and address the exact hidden emotion driving your behavior. This total neutralization of your psychological tools feels like a profound violation. It strips people of their power. Because they see through the static, their behavior shifts into what psychologists call the uncanny valley of human interaction. They don't react to your superficial social cues. If you tell a fake, performative story to get attention, they won't give you the expected validation. They will sit in a baseline state of absolute unblinking calm. To an average person, this lack of standard social mirroring doesn't look like empathy. It looks cold. It looks calculated. It looks like the behavior of an apex predator scanning for weakness. The tragic irony of the Sophia empath is that their isolation is driven by their depth. They offer an intensity of understanding that the human ego simply cannot tolerate. People don't want to be entirely known. They want to be safely perceived. They want people to buy the version of themselves they spent years manufacturing. When a Sophia empath refuses to validate the fake product and instead speaks directly to the hidden, wounded child underneath, the ego experiences it as violence. The collective response of the group is to project their own hidden darkness onto the empath. They call them weird. They call them manipulative. They label them as arrogant or detached. But there is an even darker layer to this behavioral dynamic. What happens when the Sophia empath gets tired of being hated for a gift they didn't ask for? When pushed into a corner, when subjected to prolonged smear campaigns and narcissistic envy, the Sophia empath undergoes a psychological pivot. They stop trying to heal the room, and they start mapping it for defense. Because they understand human vulnerabilities better than you understand your own habits, they know exactly where to strike. They don't need to yell. They don't need to get emotional. They can drop a single, precisely targeted sentence that dismantles your entire psychological architecture in front of everyone you are trying to impress. They become the ultimate mirror, reflecting your worst fears back at you with flawless, devastating accuracy. The world pretends to value emotional intelligence and deep connection, but the truth of human behavior is far more cynical. The world values comfort. The world values predictable, safe illusions. If you possess the ability to see through the veil, understand this. Your insight is a high-value asset, but it is also a massive liability. Unless you learn to mask your awareness, camouflage your observation, and let people believe their secrets are safe, you will continue to trigger the collective survival response of the crowd. Protect your field of view. Watch the room, map the patterns, but never let them know just how much of them you can see. The first law of human interaction is the preservation of the persona. From the moment we develop a conscious ego, we begin constructing a sophisticated psychological framework designed to negotiate status, secure belonging, and conceal our baseline vulnerabilities. This social mask is not merely a superficial layer of politeness. It is a vital survival mechanism. Every day, the average person steps into the world relying heavily on the unwritten social contract that everyone else will accept this mask at face value. We smile when we feel intense resentment. We nod in agreement when we are fiercely judgmental. And we project an aura of absolute control when our internal world is entirely fracturing. This carefully calibrated deception keeps the machinery of society running smoothly, providing a comfortable buffer zone that allows individuals to interact without ever having to expose their raw, unvarnished intentions. It creates a profound sense of psychological safety, a reassuring illusion that our secret thoughts, motives, and hidden flaws are securely locked away behind the fortress of our ribs. Then, a Sophia Empath walks into the room, and that entire illusion completely collapses. To understand why this causes such intense, visceral hatred, you have to look closely at the behavioral mechanics of how a Sophia Empath operates. They do not merely listen to the words you speak. Their nervous system functions as a highly sensitive walking polygraph that actively scans and decodes the silent data stream you are constantly broadcasting. While an ordinary person accepts your polite laugh, the Sophia Empath instantly registers the micro expressions of contempt flickering across your face for a fraction of a second. While others buy into your projected confidence, they are tracking the microscopic tension in your jaw, the sudden, sharp shift in your vocal pitch, and the subtle defensive changes in your breathing patterns. They are continuously running an unconscious, real-time asset assessment of your psychological state. You are standing there desperately trying to sell a manufactured version of yourself, completely unaware that every single lie you tell to protect your ego is entirely transparent to them. They see the hidden anger you are trying to suppress, the deep-seated envy you feel toward a colleague, and the profound insecurity driving your need for attention. This hyper-penetrative insight completely disrupts the comfort zone that human beings rely on to survive. When your subconscious mind realizes that its deepest defenses have been effortlessly bypassed by a stranger, it does not feel loved or understood. It enters a state of primal panic. The amygdala registers this complete lack of psychological privacy as an existential threat. In the realm of human behavior, being stripped of your mask without your consent feels like a profound physical violation. It places the ordinary individual in a position of total vulnerability and psychological nakedness. The tools of manipulation, subtle control, and passive aggression that people normally use to navigate their relationships are suddenly rendered completely useless. You cannot flatter a Sophia Empath to hide an agenda, and you cannot guilt-trip them to gain leverage because they are looking directly past the performance and addressing the raw, hidden emotion underneath. This total neutralization of a person's psychological toolkit doesn't just breed discomfort, it creates an intense, instinctual hostility. When people realize they can no longer hide, they do not appreciate the depth of the empath's perception. Instead, their survival instincts kick in, driving them to aggressively alienate, defame, and target the very person who saw through their safety net. The evolution of human trust is built on a precise, time-tested architecture. In normal human interaction, intimacy is an earned currency, systematically constructed over months or years through mutual vulnerability, shared experiences, and incremental disclosures. We naturally protect our internal worlds by releasing information in measured doses, constantly testing the waters to see if the other person is safe, predictable, and willing to reciprocate. This slow, predictable pacing creates a psychological buffer zone, allowing the ego time to adjust, build defenses, and form a stable conceptual model of the relationship. It is a vital emotional economy that ensures safety, giving both parties a sense of control over how much of their true selves is exposed. The Sophia Empath completely shatters this emotional economy by operating entirely outside the standard timeline of human connection. Because their behavioral tracking system is hyper-penetrative, they bypass the traditional gatekeeping mechanisms of the human psyche within minutes of meeting you. They don't wait for you to open the door to your inner world. Their intuition and observational accuracy allow them to read the blueprint of your entire psychological architecture almost instantly. They instantly mirror your core emotional states, identifying your deepest attachment styles, your hidden fears, and your unexpressed desires without a single word of explicit permission. This creates a phenomenon known as unearned intimacy. Suddenly, you find yourself in a dynamic where a virtual stranger possesses the kind of profound, granular psychological data that should only belong to a lifelong partner or a seasoned therapist. This hyper-acceleration of connection triggers an immediate, visceral defense mechanism in the average person. When someone understands your deepest psychological undercurrents, without having gone through the grueling, time-honored process of earning that privilege, the human brain registers it not as a gift, but as an invasive violation. It feels like a psychological break-in. The ego perceives this unearned intimacy as a massive imbalance of power, causing the individual to feel entirely exposed, mapped out, and defenseless. Human beings are hardwired to recoil from anyone who holds an unfair psychological advantage over them. When an ordinary person realizes that their emotional boundaries have been effortlessly permeated, a profound sense of paranoia takes root. They begin to wonder what else the empath knows, what intentions lie behind that deep perception, and how that intense insight might eventually be used against them. This instinctual dread quickly transforms into active resentment and alienation. Because the depth of the connection was achieved through the empath's raw ability rather than a slow, mutual building of trust, the relationship feels profoundly unnatural and threatening. The average person cannot rationalize why they feel so deeply seen by someone they barely know, so their subconscious mind reframes the empath's hyperintuition as something sinister, manipulative, or calculated. They convince themselves that this deep understanding is a trap, a deceptive tool used to lower their guard or gain leverage over their life. Instead of leaning into the connection, they experience a sharp, urgent need to reestablish their boundaries by pushing the empath away as violently as possible. The very depth and accuracy of the Sophia Empath's insight become the exact reasons they are pushed into isolation, as the people around them choose to destroy the mirror rather than face the terrifying speed at which they were completely understood. Every individual carries a hidden repository of repressed desires, unhealed wounds, and shameful impulses that Carl Jung famously defined as the shadow. This shadow contains everything about ourselves that we deem unacceptable, weak, or malicious. And we expend an immense amount of daily psychological energy keeping it buried deep within the subconscious. To maintain a functional sense of self-esteem, the human ego creates a complex network of defense mechanisms, rationalizations, projections, and denials, to convince itself and the world that it is entirely good, just, and rational. We actively avoid looking into this internal abyss because facing our genuine flaws requires a painful, destabilizing deconstruction of our identity. As long as we are surrounded by ordinary people who are also hiding their own shadows, a mutual, unspoken agreement remains intact. I will ignore the cracks in your facade if you ignore the cracks in mine. The presence of a Sophia Empath completely violates this collective pact of denial. Because of their hyper-acute emotional resonance and unyielding commitment to psychological truth, they act as a pristine, walking mirror, that reflects a person's absolute reality. They do not even need to speak or point out a flaw to achieve this. Their mere presence in a room alters the psychological atmosphere. When a Sophia empath looks at you with absolute calm clarity, the elaborate rationalizations you use to justify your toxic behaviors completely disintegrate. Standing near them forces an immediate involuntary confrontation with your own shadow. Suddenly, your casual passive aggression is revealed as deep-seated envy. Your performative charity is exposed as a desperate need for validation, and your unprovoked anger is unmasked as profound, unresolved childhood terror. The sophisticated illusions you spent years crafting to protect your ego are rendered entirely useless in their field of view. This subconscious exposure threat triggers an immediate volatile survival response in the human brain. When a person is forced to confront their own ugliness, insecurities, and repressed truths without being psychologically prepared to do so, the resulting discomfort is excruciating. The ego experiences this sudden exposure as a profound, agonizing threat to its survival. However, because the human mind desperately avoids taking responsibility for its own internal chaos, it instinctively projects that immense discomfort outward. Instead of acknowledging that the pain is coming from their own unhealed shadow, the individual targets the person who forced them to see it. The Sophia empath becomes the ultimate scapegoat for everyone else's buried psychological garbage. The crowd convinces themselves that the discomfort they feel isn't their own hidden shame, but rather some negative, toxic energy being generated by the empath. This dynamic explains why the hostility directed toward a Sophia empath is often completely disproportionate to any objective action they have taken. They are routinely subjected to intense smear campaigns, sudden exclusions, and irrational outbursts of anger from people they have only ever treated with kindness. The crowd is not reacting to what the empath has done. They are reacting to what the empath represents, the terrifying death of their comforting illusions. Human beings will fiercely protect their right to remain blind to their own darkness. When someone threatens that blindness by simply existing as a beacon of psychological truth, the collective group will instinctively unite to alienate, discredit, and destroy that person, choosing to smash the mirror rather than heal the broken reflection it reveals. In the architecture of human behavior, we are hardwired to look for specific feedback loops during social interactions. When we speak, we expect the person opposite us to nod, smile, tilt their head, or show a slight shift in muscle tension that mirrors our emotional output. This behavioral mimicry is what creates a sense of safety and predictability. It tells our subconscious mind that the other person is engaged, compliant, and operating within the normal boundaries of human socialization. When these expected signals are present, our nervous system relaxes, allowing us to feel in control of the social narrative. We read these micro behaviors instinctively, using them to gauge whether a person is a friend, a foe, or an ally. The Sophia empath routinely triggers a visceral sense of dread because they operate entirely outside this behavioral feedback loop, causing what behavioral psychologists refer to as the uncanny valley effect. When you interact with a Sophia empath, they do not participate in this superficial social dance. While you are speaking, laughing, or projecting a specific emotion, they often sit in a state of absolute, unblinking, baseline calm. Their eyes do not flit around the room, nor do they offer the performative nods that people use to fill uncomfortable silences. Instead, their gaze is intensely observant, tracking your microexpressions, your shifts in posture, and your breathing patterns with the cold, analytical precision of a biometric scanner. They are absorbing massive amounts of psychological data without giving you any superficial emotional feedback in return. This total asymmetry in communication sets off primitive survival alarms in the human brain. Because they are not mirroring your social cues, your subconscious cannot categorize them as safe or predictable. The human mind is terrified of what it cannot read or control. When a person encounters this level of unyielding calm, combined with hyper-focused observation, the primitive brain registers it as a predatory threat marker. In nature, the creature that stands perfectly still, watches without blinking, and analyzes your movements without emotional reaction is always the predator scanning for a weakness. Therefore, even though the Sophia Empath may have entirely benevolent intentions, their lack of performative socialization causes ordinary people to experience a profound, instinctual sense of unease. They look perfectly human, yet they act like biological anomalies that are entirely immune to social manipulation. This instinctual discomfort explains why people frequently describe Sophia Empaths as cold, calculated, or secretly malicious, even when their actual behavior is completely blameless. The crowd misinterprets the empath's deep state of focused awareness as a hostile act of surveillance. Because the average person cannot comprehend a mind that processes human behavior with such clinical, detached accuracy, they assume that this silent tracking must be part of a hidden, sinister agenda. They convince themselves that the empath is deliberately withholding emotional feedback to gain an upper hand or to psychologically manipulate the room. This uncanny valley response transforms the Sophia Empath into an object of profound suspicion. People find themselves completely unable to relax in their presence, feeling a constant, exhausting pressure to defend themselves against a silent observer who refuses to play by the comforting, dishonest rules of standard human interaction. The ultimate paradox of the Sophia Empath lies in the hidden mechanics of their psychological defense systems. The world routinely operates under the false assumption that an empath is inherently fragile, a soft and vulnerable creature destined to be a perpetual victim of the world's harshness. Because they possess a deep, highly porous capacity to feel and absorb the emotional frequencies of those around them, ordinary people mistake this profound sensitivity for weakness. They assume that because the empath can be hurt, they can be easily manipulated, controlled, or pushed into submissive compliance. This miscalculation is a fatal error in behavioral assessment. When a Sophia Empath is subjected to prolonged malice, systemic smear campaigns, or narcissistic envy, their internal architecture undergoes a massive, cold recalculation, shifting them instantly from a passive healer into an apex psychological threat. To understand the terrifying nature of this transformation, you must look at the sheer volume of behavioral data a Sophia Empath possesses. While an ordinary aggressor relies on loud intimidation, overt insults, or superficial manipulation tactics, the Sophia Empath has spent the entire relationship silently mapping the aggressor's psychological.